So Demons have been out for a little while now. People have had chances to play different lists, different characters, see what's working with the new Demons Codex, and I think having played numerous games now and had a chance to look at some of the different options, parts of the Demon Codex have really started to shine, and they certainly have weaknesses, but one of the really, I think, competitive lists for 6th edition now is Nurgle. And there were a lot of complaints when the Codex came out that Nurgle units lost Feel No Pain. There are ways to give them Feel No Pain with a herald carrying a locus, but I'm not even sure you need that anymore. I mean, it certainly makes you even harder to get rid of, but it's expensive. You're probably not going to put it on more than 1 or maybe 2 units. So Nurgle, and potentially the all Nurgle list for Demons. So why is Nurgle a competitive demon? And I'll point out that there's a significant weakness to them. They do take a pretty solid hit from template weapons, but only template weapons for the most part. Maybe a couple guard weapons. And the reason that Nurgle is very competitive now is Nurgle demons, for the most part, all Nurgle demons, get defensive grenades and they get shrouded, which means they're already pretty good toughness. And if a Nurgle demon here is standing in the open and he's 8 inches or less distance from an opponent, then he is both stealthed and shrouded, which means they have a pretty phenomenal save. So let's say this heavy bolter is shooting at this plague bearer from 1 inch away. Just out in the open, that plague bearer is going to get stealth and shrouded, so it's a 6-up save from the stealth and then a 4-up save from the shrouded. So that's pretty good. That's not going to be taken away by AP or anything. And if he's got any sort of terrain, let's say Aegis line, then he's saving on a 2-up. And I point out any kind of terrain. So if this isn't an Aegis line, but he's still within 8 inches of his opponent, let's say it's a 5-up save for being in area terrain within 8 inches, that's going to be a 2-up save still. It's a 3-up save if it's outside of 8 inches, as long as the shooting weapon doesn't ignore terrain. So Nurgle got really effective, I think, in 6th edition now, because you can take cheap troops who, as long as you put them in terrain, or if you buy an Aegis line for your army, or 2 if you're double force orging, then you can put a block or more of guys who are going to get a 2-up save. You got guys that in the open, they have a 4-up save if there's an enemy near them. They could always go to ground, literally just in the open, and get a 4 or 3-up save depending on where the shooting is coming from. This makes them extremely survivable. The issue with cover, the fact that they're getting a 2 bonus to their cover saves because of shrouded, pretty much means that since most games involve objectives, these guys can sit on an objective or near an objective or contest objectives for most of the game unless something charges them. Now, they do have some weaknesses you have to think about with Nurgle troops, or any Nurgle unit actually. They're always slow and purposeful, so they can't run, which means if you deep strike them, let's say those were both Nurgle, you deep struck them, when they come in, they're base to base, and that's not going to change for 1 round because they can't run. They're slow and purposeful means that, let's say your plague bearers win combat against a group of whatever, anything. When your opponent breaks from combat and runs, the Nurgle troops just kind of stand there and their opponents get away. So you can't ever run anyone down because you're slow and purposeful. So there's a disadvantage there. They don't have great ballistic skills, so even the Great Unclean One who's your greater demon, has ballistic skill 3. So these guys aren't awesome at shooting the quad cannon that's associated with your Aegis line. But, still it gets 4 twin link shots. When they have shooting attacks because of a demonic gift, their accuracy is not great. So, that's a consideration. But, all in all, Nurgle units became very survivable. Their access to psychic powers gives them access to both the plague powers, which for the most part are actually pretty effective at infantry control. They're not great for dealing with they're really not great for dealing with vehicles, but you can kill an awful lot of guys using any of the plague psychic powers. And then they have access to biomancy, which makes them either incredibly survivable or turns them into very powerful close combat, killing machines, depending on which power you get. It's worth noting. I don't think the Great Unclean one is easy to kill without biomancy, but were he to get several of the biomancy powers, he's almost unkillable during the game. If he has Eternal Warrior and It Will Not Die and the Toughness 10. Depending on the power, he's pretty hard to get rid of. Now, disadvantages to Nurgle lists. They don't have a great deal of shooting, so the firepower is going to have to come from something like Nurgle Soul Grinders. They aren't fast, so when you can't run, which gives them some disadvantages. But they do have a pretty fast-moving cavalry unit. They have a jetpack cavalry that can still move in the assault phase, because Slow and Purposeful does not say that they can't jetpack away, so they just can't run, but they could use the wings on the plague drones to fly an extra couple inches. They have access to poison weapons, which means, for the most part, even the lowly plague bear could kill a toughness 10 monster because he can wound them on a 4-up. And most of these guys, if they're strong enough, so they're going up against Sisters, Guard, Space Marines, anything that isn't really a monstrous creature, they re-roll their wounds because they're poisoned. So they're resilient in close combat. So, my experience with them and looking at the rules, I think one of the best demon lists is going to be almost all or all Nurgle list, using Plague Bearers as your troops. But you could get Nurglings if you're short on models, or you really want a double Force Org, and they're a cheap troop choice. They have the most resilient HQ. The Great Unclean one is toughness 7 with 6 wounds, and it could get It Shall Not Die or Eternal Warrior or both on the psychic powers, and it's a monster in close combat. So the Great Unclean one's amazing for an HQ. The Heralds of Nurgle can't even compare them to the 5th edition, the 4th edition Demons Codex. They've gotten so much better, but they don't survive as a standalone unit, so you're going to attach a Herald to something else. The Beasts of Nurgle, they're very hard to kill. They have an amazing save because of that Shrouded and Stealth at close range. They move through cover as if it's not there. The counter charge, it's not all that useful, but I think it certainly can deter opponents from making a charge when they realize, those beasts over there might attack me after I've completed a charge. But it has some drawbacks in that it currently does not prevent you from charging units you can't kill, or from charging units you really don't want to be in combat with. So the beasts, they can be intimidating. They're a bit expensive, but they're pretty solid units. In terms of their fast attacks, those plague drones, they're cool looking, they're intimidating models, they're quite expensive for what you get, but they have some purposes, and if they FAQ how Icons of Chaos work, then those will be very useful, because you can fly them around the table and use them as drops drop homing beacons versus right now where you can use the chaos icon when it comes in. In terms of the heavy support, Nurgle Soul Grinders are amazing because if you stick them in terrain, you're going to give them a 3 or possibly 2 up save. A Soul Grinder standing behind a building, let's just pretend scale-wise this guy's a Soul Grinder, and he can look over the edge of this building. Now, imagine this on a tabletop, but he has a 2 up save against anything shooting down range unless it ignores cover. So, Soul Grinders are incredibly powerful in the Nurgle list because of their high survivability. The other heavy supports, you could make a Demon Prince into heavy support, but Demon Princes of Nurgle have gone way down in terms of effectiveness. They were amazing in 4th, 5th edition, but they're a lot less now. I think the Great Unclean One's just a better buy. Downside for Nurgle, though, is they do have a problem dealing with flyers. So, you can give them weapons that have Skyfire, obviously Soul Grinders, and if you took 3 of them, you would have 3 Skyfired Soul Grinders. If you don't go all Nurgle, then you could put Heralds of Tzeentch with them and twin link their Skyfiring weapons. If you want to, you can easily buy, Quad Cannon or Las Cannon on the Aegis line, but you don't have anyone with awesome ballistic skills, so your likelihood of taking down a flyer with the Las Cannon is not great. So, a few other things, Helldrakes or flying monstrous creatures, because they ignore cover saves when they use their template weapons, or Dread Knights. I'm trying to think what else can sort of fly with a template weapon. Anything that flies with a template weapon, or jumps across the table with a template weapon, is a threat to Nurgle units, because you're standing behind this Aegis line. If she had a heavy flamer, she just flames right through it. You don't get your cover save. There's some Imperial Guard weapons that ignore cover saves. Barrage weapons could potentially ignore the cover save from an Aegis line, but they don't ignore cover saves from area terrain. And so you have to look, what your opponent got that. So you have to look, what has your opponent got that can ignore cover saves? And against armies that have a lot of that, these guys suffer. So against Tau, if they have tons of marker lights can take away the cover save from Nurgle units, but it takes 2 marker light hits for that to happen, and every time they do that, the Tau are using their marker lights from a previous unit's shooting attack. So it can hurt them, but it can also require really focused attention on 1 or 2 units. Other weaknesses, obviously instability and Warp Storm can hurt a demon army, but if you play almost all Nurgle or any one demon, then 3 out of the 4 demon shooting attacks that come out of the Warp Storm don't affect you. And no matter what, even against weapons that ignore cover, these demons are going to get at least a 5+ save. So, it could go to a 6 or a 4 because of Warp Storm, but for the most part, they do save 1/3 of the time, even against weapons that ignore cover. And most Nurgle units are high enough toughness that instant death doesn't apply to them too often. Plague Bearer here takes strength 8 to instant death him, so a Melt-A-Gun will do it. But that's just 1 troop, so, it's a Melt-A-Gun on a troop. On any of your big guys, Great Unclean Ones, for example, the only things that can instantly kill them are weapons with the instant death special rule. So, at toughness 7, they don't even take damage from las guns. And in terms of survivability of greater demons, I think Great Unclean Ones are the ones that have the greatest survivability, because the other greater demons, they die because of their poor saves now. They die pretty easily, just to volley of fire, but toughness 7 makes it actually impossible to wound with a lot of weapons. And the fact that a Great Unclean One standing in ruins gets a 2-up save, because he's a monstrous creature. He doesn't need to have 25% cover like he used to. If he could be standing in area terrain, he's getting his save. So a lot of things got better for them. Now, if he's standing out on a grassy field, he's got an area cover of 5, so 4-3 if he's being shot at across the field. But it's still a pretty amazing save. And if you put a Great Unclean One behind an Aegis line, I've tested this. You can walk right up to it, and it gives more than 25% cover. And certainly on the old Great Unclean One models, the really old ones, they're not much taller than this Plague Bear, so they get a tremendous cover save. So I think, I don't want to take this too long, but I think with the new Demons Codex, the army that got the biggest boost, or the demon that got the biggest boost, are definitely Nurgle. They don't rely on combat as much as some of the other ones. They don't have to get overwatched to death. They can hold objectives almost anywhere on the field. They get amazing saves, they're decent toughness, and their shooting attacks, if you're using Soul Grinders of Nurgle, are potentially devastating to your opponent. So it's a solid choice.